Joined by Tea Party Republican Congressman Steve King, that's him on your left, and by the Democrat from Texas, Henry Cuellar, on your right. And let me start there, Congressman Cuellar. Are your Texas constituents with you, or are they with your Texan Senator Ted Cruz, who put on his personal longest ever speech that wasn't quite a filibuster? So where does the Lone Star State stand, Congressman Cuellar?
They stand with me in the sense that they understand that the basic responsibility of Congress is, one, is to pass a budget on time, and two, to pay its bills on time. We ought to be focusing on the budget right now, talking about how much we ought to spend. Do we have sequester? Do we have sequester a year or two or three? But unfortunately, we're talking about other things on a bill that has passed about 3 years ago.
Well, let me ask you this, Congressman Cuellar, before I get to Congressman King. The sequester, the sky was supposed to fall on the sequester, and most Americans look around and they say, you know, I don't see the pain, I don't see the blood in the streets that I expected. Is this going to be one of those, a lot of sound and fury that ultimately signifies nothing, Congressman Cuellar?
Well, you know, certainly down there on the border, I had a lot of meetings with Border Patrol saying that they were worried about their furloughs, they were worried about long lines at the bridges, they were worried about not being paid from the U.S. Attorney's Office, from the probation officers, all those folks that were worried about year one. This is why we ought to be talking about the budget. Are we going to have a budget of we're talking about discretionary funding of $986 billion? Are we going to have a sequester year two? Let's talk about the budget. This is what the emergency budget is all about. But we're not even talking about that. Nobody has talked about how much money we ought to spend or not spend and how we fund the basic services.
Congressman King, answer your colleague's question there. Are you overlooking other important business to focus on what is essentially a political act?
Well, I don't think so, Geraldo, and it's because we have sent the appropriations over to the Senate that funds the government at sequestration levels. Whatever happens, that's what we're going to end up with for spending. What we've said, though, is we're not going to allow any funding to go to the implementation or enforcement of Obamacare. That's where we really disagree. The House has passed approximately half of our appropriation bills. The Senate has passed none. They haven't passed any in a number of years, and that's what gives Harry Reid the leverage to say, look, now the House is threatening to shut the government down. We're not doing that. We put the resources there, and he said we will not negotiate. The president said he will not negotiate, and we have done the responsible thing time after time. And so this becomes a disagreement on a single issue, and the speculation is who will blink, and that's how this is going to be decided. But in the end, there will be an appropriation for the sequestration levels. The question is, will any of it go into Obamacare? And the people have rejected Obamacare.
The smart money, Congressman King, is that unless it is Speaker Boehner who blinks, then we're going to have a shutdown. The hope among moderates that I've spoken to is that Speaker Boehner and some moderates, agree to something just to keep the government open. Is that the possibility? What will you do? Let me be very frank about it, maybe very direct. What will you, Congressman King, do if Speaker Boehner seeks a compromise that keeps the government open?
If this means funding Obamacare, I'm very likely a no vote on that. Now, I can't speak for anybody else, but the question again becomes, who will blink? If I knew how this was going to end, then let's get to that. But this is about getting to a resolution of this matter. Even if there is a government shutdown, it'll be an act on Harry Reid or an act by the president. But we've had 17 shutdowns in the past. I've never had anybody come to me and say, I really missed my trip to Yosemite. The government really shouldn't have stood on that principle. There were 2 shutdowns under Bill Clinton, and House Republicans won one of those, and in the other one we ended up with a balanced budget. So we may end up with better policy. We hold our line. That's the only chance we have. We'll never recover Obamacare if it's implemented. That's really the principle, Geraldo.
I hear you, Congressman, but the last shutdown, as all accounts agree, cost the taxpayers $1.4 billion. So it was $1.4 billion wasted. In other words, we had to pay federal civil servants and others who did not work. We had to pay them anyway, and the other costs involved were $1.4 billion. I mean, won't this shutdown add to the deficit you say you care so much about, Congressman King?
We got a balanced budget out of that. I would write a check today for $1.4 billion if we could get to balance and balance the budget as many years as transpired out of that showdown in 1995 and 96. Now, I don't think you can actually equate the two, but I'd say a $1.4 billion in exchange for a balanced budget, that would be worth it today, and I'd take that deal.
And now, Congressman Cuellar, you have a situation where the Republicans are saying it's the Democrats' fault. I mean, what about the blame game? Where do you think it will reside when all this is said and done?
Well, if we see the same thing that happened in the 1990s, it's going to fall on the Republicans, and this is going to fall on Republicans again. Look at this. Look, the Wall Street Journal already said it's a bad step that the Republicans are doing. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce wants us to pass this emergency bill. If you look at McCain, Coburn, even Mitch McConnell, they're saying if you don't like Obamacare, this is not the way to do it. You're not going to shut down government. Let me just make this point. A little prediction here. I think at the end, if you look at what's been happening under the Republican majority, at the very end, the final bill is going to be where the people in the middle, both Democrats and Republicans, are going to get together and pass something. The far left and the far right are going to say no. And I think that's what's going to happen. But the last point I want to make, and this is very important. Imagine right now if there was a Republican president and a Democratic and we said we're going to shut down government unless you pass immigration reform. The Republicans will be crying murder, and this is what we're seeing right now. It's going to fall on my Republican colleagues.
I saw Congressman King's ears turn red just then, so we're going to get you guys back as you start voting. Ladies and gentlemen, up next.